Alright, team, so we're back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and if you happen to have seen it over the last 24 hours or so, you knew we had to talk about it. We have another image from some Mocap actors that work on Final Fantasy VII Remake that seem to maybe be teasing something. In this particular case, Cid? Here's the thing, we looked at images from the motion capture actors a few times over the last couple of years since Remake's kind of really been a thing. And while those are interesting and fun to talk about and speculate on, it's been somewhat subjective, right? We looked at images of like the Tifa and Cloud Mocap actor together, and like the Cloud Mocap actor's like laying down on like a beach chair with an umbrella, so maybe it's some shit for Costa del Sol. But at the same time, it could just be him casually sitting there, and even if they're doing motion capture work together, it maybe doesn't have to be for Remake, but we've all seen just like pictures of them working together, or it's just a picture of them like casually hanging out together, but it still gets the community talking. But at the end of the day, it's still really just speculation. Now, the odds of them doing mocap work together and it not being for Remake seem maybe kind of low, but again, I don't know what all projects they work on, and potentially if there's any crossover, whatever the case. However, Web Today seems to be a lot less subjective, as it seems to definitively be for something FF7 Remake related, or at least FF7 related, whatever you want to say, because we do have the Cloud Mocap actor again. And he's posing with two other mocap actors. One of them appears to be for Bear, just based on their pose, and the other one, a lot of the community is thinking it's Cid. So right here we have the image, and the guy in the middle is Cloud's mocap actor, and he's posing somewhat like Cloud does, where Cloud uses his right hand to reach back for the handle of the butt sword. You see it on the cover of the game. The guy on the right is posing like Barrett does, where Barrett uses like his left arm to brace his right arm, usually as he's firing. On the left is where things get a bit interesting, because it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly who this character is. Now, people have been saying Cid over the last day or so, but that's really only based on Cid from FF7 within Kingdom Hearts, because that's where he stands a lot with his hands on his hips. You can find multiple instances throughout the Kingdom Hearts games where you see Cid standing like this, and some people do think that it's a bit of a reach to think that that is Cid in that mocap image based on this alone. But the thing is, when it comes to the character Cid, at least for me personally, I can't think of anything unique about him in terms of his body language, outside of the way that he actually stands with his weapon in his hand. Obviously, it's a two-handed weapon, so he has a unique stance for that. And maybe that's why they gave him that particular stance when it came to the Kingdom Hearts series, and I don't see why they wouldn't also incorporate that into Remake. And if you look at old character art from FF7, Cid does stand with one hand in his pocket, which isn't too dissimilar from having your hands on your hips, and also, obviously, the dude's in a mocap suit, which does not have pockets. I'm going to try to convince you guys that the guy on the left is a mocap actor for Cid. I'm just saying it is possible, and I don't think it's that much of a reach to use Kingdom Hearts as an example. I mean, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy are pretty goddamn close. Now, the other option here for who this could be, it could be better or worse, depending on your thoughts here. And, for me personally, I'd be lying if I said I didn't like it more, is that this is possibly the mocap actor for Zack, because Zack also stands like this.
Boy, oh boy.
With Zack, you do see somewhat often, putting his hands on his hips as well. And look, I know people are excited to see the characters of Vincent and the characters of Cid. They're the only main party members we've yet to see, unless you want to include Kate Sis Moogle. We've yet to see them, right? So I get why people are excited to see Cid. But man, like I said, I'd be lying if I wasn't excited for the potential of this being Zack. Because if this is Zack, and their mocap actors are doing work together, then that'd mean that we'd be getting a scene of Zack, Cloud, and Barrett together, which is huge, right? That's the big shit. Also, on top of that, Barrett's never even met the character of Zack, which would be very, very interesting. Something that Remake can do for us, which I think is pretty cool. But on top of that, that would also, if this is the character of Zack right here, the mocap actor, then that would also mean that Zack would be catching up with our party at some point in time. There's a lot of things that could be going on here if this is Zack, dude. Now, the safer bet of the two is potentially Cid, right? I do think that Zack will have some sort of impact with our party at some point, run into our group, some sort of reunion with Aerith, stuff like that. I do think that's going to happen, but it's hard to say if that would be in part 2, and that's where the other part of the discussion comes into play here, is what is this mocap work being done for? Because a lot of people, or at least a good chunk of people, are speculating that it could be mocap work for part 3, because it really wouldn't make sense, since we're nearing like 3 years of Remake Part 2 supposed to be in some sort of development, for them to still be doing mocap work for part 2. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. And if that is the case, and they're doing mocap work for part 3, then if that is the character of Cid, then we might not be seeing the character of Cid until part 3, which I really wouldn't be surprised. I've said it before a bunch of times on the channel. I personally think the part 2 would end around Nibelheim. And obviously Rocket Town and Cid is beyond that. Which to me, again, I don't think is that much of a surprise. Like, we're going to have a massive party going into the next game. We don't know how they're going to do it. We don't know if we're going to be able to swap in and out of party members all the time with all the entire group. But we're going to have Yuffie join up with the main party at some point in the next game. Red 13 is going to be playable. We should be coming across Kate Sith and him joining the party, be able to level him up and shit. And potentially Vincent, depending on how much we get to Nibelheim, how much we can level him up if he joins the party. He might just be a guest character, teasing for the next game, have Cid and Vincent for the next game. We're going to have a big party going into part 2. So I'd be surprised if we got the character of Cid as well in part 2 and can level him and use him and shit. But since we're talking about it, I wouldn't be opposed to them ending part 2 somewhere around Rocket Town and us getting like the Tiny Bronco and like that be the cliffhanger ending, because it's kind of teasing that the next game's going to be a lot more open. We're going to have the freedom of the Tiny Bronco to explore a lot of the world. I wouldn't be against that. And they could also, that's where we could run into the character of Sid and get a little bit of playtime with the character of Vincent too, whether he's a guest or actually playable, I don't know. Now, I don't know how you would end part 2 around Rocket Town and the Tiny Bronco and all that shit, because like the last boss fight we have in that area, at least in the original FF7, is Palmer. And while I definitely want to kick his repulsive fat ass when it comes to Remake and watching him get smashed by a Shinner truck, not much of an epic conclusion to the Remake Part 2 story, right? So I don't know what they would do, but maybe we just have a different boss fight. I don't know. It's just an idea. The main takeaway from all of this is that with this image right here, I would say definitively more than any other mocap image we've looked at in the past, I would say this is mocap work being done for Remake. Now, what is being done? It's hard to say. Is it Part 2 stuff? Is it Part 3 stuff? A potential DLC for Part 2? I've seen that kind of theorized out there. And regardless of what the mocap work is being done, the characters involved. It's definitely Cloud, definitely Barry, but who's the third guy? Is it Sid? Is it Zack? Is it somebody else entirely? It's kind of hard to say. That's where we pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this? Because I'll be completely honest, when I first seen the image, I wasn't even 100% who I thought it could be, because I was seeing like, the tweets and the posts on Reddit and stuff like that, and people talking about it potentially being Sid. So I couldn't even really form my own opinion, but the only character I can think of from FF7 that usually has their hands on their hips, or has their hands on their hips quite often, is the character of Zack. So I feel like it's got to be one of the two, but it could be somebody else entirely. My dudes, that is going to be the video. I definitely want to know your thoughts on this. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys already wants to do more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter, YT. I'm a Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We inhale.